How's everybody doing tonight? I got a real fun story for y'all. I hope you're buckled up. So in 2018, I moved to Columbus, Georgia to become an associate professor of history here at the university. In that same year, over 120 monuments to the Confederacy were removed from across the American South. I imagine everybody in this room remembers that moment as it was plastered across our news screens each and every single evening. I saw that as an opportunity to get my students to understand the importance of the past as a way to understand and process the present. But I also wanted them to understand that the present very much informs the stories we tell about the past. So if you all leave here tonight and after this talk with an understanding of yourself and your relationship to the past, I will feel like I've done my job. Can you all do that for me? This is where I tell you the crazy story. So around that same time, I had a colleague who told me that there were tunnels that cut underneath Columbus, Georgia, connecting the Chattahoochee River to Broadway, about 2 blocks away. Supposedly, enslaved peoples would come to the city along the river, would go into these tunnels underneath the city streets themselves, and then would be pushed further into bondage. I saw this as an opportunity to find something amazing, to take my students to those tunnels and fundamentally transform the way that they understood the past. They would have to confront the hard histories of our region in a way that they had never seen before, and so I started pursuing them doggedly. I asked my colleague, where can I find the tunnels? And he said he had a former student who had worked at a restaurant, and if I went to that restaurant the next day, they would show me the tunnels. So you know what I did the next day? I went to that restaurant, and I showed up like a bat out of hell, okay? So enthusiastic, it was overwhelming to the hostess that I encountered that day. I said, I'm looking for tunnels. I hear you have tunnels. I hear that enslaved people moved under the streets to go here to a slave holding pen. Can I see the tunnels? To which her furrowed brow was forever burned into the back of my brain. I panicked. How can I tell her that I'm not crazy? So I pulled out a business card. Let me start over. I swear I'm legitimate. I'm looking for tunnels so I can bring students into them. Have you heard of them? To which that brow just melted back to normal, and then she started telling me every story she had ever heard growing up in the city about these tunnels, and she talked even longer than I do. Okay? At the end, I said, cool, can I see the tunnels? And she said, we don't have tunnels. But the coffee shop 2 doors down does, okay? So I went to the coffee shop, this time business card in hand, presented it to the manager. Dear ma'am, I'm looking for tunnels beneath your floorboards. Don't panic, okay? I hear that they've got this crazy story around them, and I'd love to be able to see them for myself. And she immediately opened up and started telling me anything and everything she had ever heard about these tunnels, and went on and on and on and on. I said, cool, can I see the tunnels? And she said, no. But the Subway sandwich shop down the street does have them. And I just want you all to take a moment to imagine the headline of what it would have been like had the Subway sandwich shop had subterranean tunnels beneath it. I was salivating, not over the sandwiches, but over the idea that I was going to break this story in such a hilarious fashion, right? I went to the Subway. They had heard of the tunnels. They added some ghost stories to it. I asked, can I see the tunnels? They said, no, we don't have them, but good luck. So by this point, I was so enthusiastic that these people were engaging in the history mystery with me. I could not stop. I stopped doing my normal work, don't tell my boss, and I started going to every door I could that would open for me, and I asked, can I see these tunnels? And eventually, somebody said yes. Are y'all ready for somebody to say yes? Yes. The hooch, all right? Their mission since Prohibition, okay, was to intoxicate me with a fantastic story. The second I walked through those doors, I went to the bartender. I said, I'm looking for tunnels, and she grabbed a set of keys and walked me to the floorboards that then lifted up, and she said, follow me, sir. Are you ready to see some tunnels? And I said, hell yes, I'm ready to see some tunnels. And we went down beneath the floorboards, and the second her feet left the last step, I remember her turning and going, here's your tunnels. And I looked around and I saw cases of PBR beer here and glow-in-the-dark aliens from God knows what over here, and then an earthenware basement that surrounded me everywhere else. And I turned to her and I said, honey, this is not a tunnel. This is an earthenware basement, which was common in 19th century constructions, right? When you live next to a river and the river overflows, that water needs to go somewhere, and so it funnels down into the basement and then back into the water table. Not an exciting answer for her, even in the slightest, but she was grateful that I had engaged with her in this history mystery, and I went about my business. The next place that I thought I had my biggest break was actually at St. Luke's Methodist Church. I had heard rumors of tunnels from this woman who said that in the 1970s, she had seen the tunnels herself when she was a child. So I reached out to their public safety officer. I said, I want to come see your tunnels. Can you give me a tour? And they said, yes. Mitch welcomed me with open arms the very next day. Mitch is one of my favorite people in this city because Mitch can spin a yarn, tell a story like nobody else. Okay? He showed me everything. He told me all the sundry stories you always know exist around a church, but nobody ever wants to talk about out loud, right? And towards the end, he said, all right, Bryan, there's a tunnel. It's in the dark recesses behind the HVAC unit in the basement. Are you ready? And I said, let's do this. I remember just how dark it was, y'all, because he turned the flashlight on his phone and it danced in the dark, right? He handed it to me at one point, leaned over, and then he looked at me and he goes, I heard something back here a couple months ago. I was like, holy shit, here we go, okay. And he pulled back the biggest manhole cover I've ever seen in my life. And 10 feet down into the ground, this is a picture of that very moment with Mitch's camera, okay? 10 feet down, there was water. And I looked at him, what did you hear, Mitch? And he put his hand on my shoulder like my father used to do, and he went, there was a fish down there. I remember the pregnant pause, because storytellers know the importance of a pregnant pause. I just did it on all of y'all. Did you even realize it? And I looked at him and I said, cool, this is an old sewer system. That fish got here from the river, but thanks. And then I went about my business. A couple weeks later, Historic Columbus Foundation got in touch with me, and they said that if I wanted to get to the bottom of the tunnels, I had to go to the Lion House, right? The Lion House, an iconic structure inspired by Greek and Egyptian imagery, named after the two iconic lions at either side of the entryway, has a passageway in the basement. All the sources told me this. I did all the reading I could while I waited for the owner to get back in touch with me to show me around his house, and I learned so much. Supposedly, the Confederacy had hid their last bit of treasure in the basement of this house at one point in time. The passageway may have been used by Dr. Hoxie, who was responsible for ushering, pushing, evacuating the Native American population out of the area in the early 1830s. And maybe, just maybe, he was so paranoid they were going to return, he built a secret passageway to be able to escape that eventual attack, right? I also knew the doctors famously worked with enslavers in the 19th century to provide bills of health so that those enslavers could sell people at a higher level for a higher price tag. I even found stories of maybe moonshiners had been using the passageway during the Prohibition era, which made the hooch even funnier to me, our mission since Prohibition. And one story said that the house was linked to the old Racine Hotel, which had a speakeasy in it. It all felt so possible. So that when I got the call, let's go see the Lion House, the owner engaged with every single story, every bit of piece of evidence I had found to that point in time. I was so excited. He showed me every room in this house. And then as we ended the tour, we exited and went around the outside towards the door to the basement, and he stopped me. He said, I can't take you in there. I thought, I've just spent 2 hours listening to all of your stories. I can't take you in there. Somebody has to keep the old bitch's secrets. And I can only imagine that my face did exactly what the hostess's face did at that restaurant I went to. My furrowed brow must have immediately just crystallized because he followed it up with this ridiculous nugget. On my mother's deathbed, she asked me about the passageway, and I refused to tell her. He had a tremor in his voice, which had to just be there for effect, right? And I was so angry and so driven to find these tunnels that I kept digging, and I interviewed everybody I could possibly think of to interview to better understand this passageway, and I figured it all out. Are y'all ready for the truth behind the tunnels? I can't hear you. Yes. It's not slavery. It's not indigenous removal. It's not moonshiners, y'all. It's all drainage. It doesn't feel good, does it? But so much of history is really boring stuff. We build it up. The folklore makes it entertainment on some level. And when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, what we've really got here is successive generations trying to combat the environment. Columbus was a swamp when the Creek Native Americans lived here. When they settled the town in 1828, they started trying to get rid of the water. They built earthenware basements. They built old sewer systems. And with each successive generation, modern hydrology started kicking in. And modern hydrology is a really fun topic, ain't it? Not so much, but that's what it is. And I had disproved the tunnels, and I felt so good about it. And then 2 years ago, Kathy Fussell made this quilt. Kathy Fussell is a former English professor at the university here. Kathy Fussell is a famous quilter, and she made a quilt about this story, and it encapsulates everything. The river created the need for the tunnels. The water drained out of it, and then we filled those tunnels with our imaginations. The things that cause us anxiety about our past. Our identities as people, as Columbusites, are bound up in what's happened in this city over the last 200 years, and we can't escape it, but we can entertain ourselves with it. And that's real. And Kathy made me realize that was real, as only an English professor can do. So the next time you all hear a story that seems a little too good to be true, a little crazy maybe, take a minute. Be critical of it, be cynical, prove it, disprove it, all of the things, but then take a moment to value it for what it is. It's a story. Folklore matters because it tells us a hell of a lot about ourselves and where we've been. All of those monuments that were torn down in 2018 were created by people trying to figure out who they were in a moment, right? And sometimes those stories are predicated on power dynamics that just propagate injustices, and we should challenge them. We should also take a moment to value them as artifacts of humanity. Folklore matters. Walk away from this with that. Thank you.